Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Coredumpina, and in this video I will be sharing my thoughts and experience with Baldur's Gate 3. So this is a game that I have played ever since it got initially released for early access back in October 2020. I played all of the available content at the time, and now that we are getting closer to the final release, I replayed it, just to refresh my memory on the rule set, the game mechanics, the system, all that good stuff. And also to check out the differences between the initial state of the early access and its current state, which will likely be the state of the final release, since we are also only 3 or 4 days away. I will also be making certain comparisons between this game and the originals, Baldur's Gate 1, 2 and Throne of Ball, because this game is called Baldur's Gate 3 after all, and that name does carry a certain weight, especially with the specific player base in which I find myself included. So, if you don't know me or my channel, do know that Baldur's Gate are my favorite games of all time. Classic RPGs is my favorite genre of video game. There's already a lot of content for classic RPGs and Baldur's Gate in my channel, in case you want to check it out. But do know that I enjoy these games very much, and I do feel very passionate about them. So I will be making some comparisons between the originals and this new one. Naturally, we are talking about two different games that at this point are going to be very different, because the originals are over 20 years old and this one is a modern game. So a lot of differences are to be expected, and expectations do need to be managed so that people don't get frustrated when they don't find what they are expecting coming from the older games. I will also be referencing certain similarities between Baldur's Gate 3 and Divinity Original Sin 2. The reason for that being they are made by the same company, Larian, and Baldur's Gate 3 is running on the same game engine of Divinity Original Sin 2. So some similarities will be found. Now, I want to make it absolutely clear right from the get-go one thing about this video, because I do know that these topics can be controversial and a lot of people feel very defensive about certain things that I might mention here. My purpose with this video is to share how I think or how I feel about this game, and I will be mentioning positives as well as mentioning some negatives. It is a subjective topic. I'm going to be sharing my personal opinion. It might not fit with yours. But I do want you to understand that if I am speaking at times in a critical way about the game, it's not because I want to bash on the game or speak ill about Larian. It's only because I like these games so much. I want this game to do well. So that's the reason, right? I feel passionate about these games, so if I sound critical, that's the reason. It's not because I'm bashing on anything or just being mean for no reason. So, to get that out of the way, I want Baldur's Gate 3 to do well. I want it to be a success. I'm very much looking forward to playing this game and having a lot of fun with it for the coming months or years. I want to replay it with different classes, different party combinations, playing with different spells, playing with different alignments, role-playing on different aspects. I really, really want this game to be a success. Not only for that, but also because classic RPGs are not really the most popular style of game. You don't see this kind of game coming out every day. So we have a few very good examples of successful classic RPGs in Pillars of Eternity, Pathfinder, and to a certain extent a less popular one, which is Solasta. I think these are very successful classic RPGs, but there could be more. So if this game is a big success, maybe they will make more of them, this company or other companies. So if this game does well, everybody benefits. Okay, so with that out of the way, I will be starting by talking about what I feel that Baldur's Gate 3 has going for it, the big positives about this game. The first one I will say is that Baldur's Gate 3 is a game based in Dungeons and Dragons. So it's using the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition rule set. And for those of you who might not know, Dungeons and Dragons is a very popular and it is a vast and extremely rich universe. You have a lot of lore, you have a lot of monster manuals to describe the monsters of the world, different races, different classes, combinations of classes, spells to play with, an excellent combat system. There's just so much that Dungeons and Dragons does well in terms of defining a really cool fantasy world that just by being a game based on Dungeons and Dragons, using that as its core system, it already has a lot of potential to being a successful game. So if they can leverage that into something good, the potential of this game is enormous. The other thing that I feel that the game has going for it is that it is a modern classic RPG. The originals are over 20 years old, like I mentioned before. So by being a modern game, it's running on a modern engine, it has certain quality of life features or a certain look and feel that new players might more easily get accustomed to. In that same sense, the original Baldur's Gates were running using Dungeons and Dragons Advanced 2nd Edition rule set. This one is using the 5th edition, and a lot has changed between the two. So one of the things that I think most people agree on regarding the 5th edition is that it simplifies the overall system. It's less complex. It's easier for new players to get into and grow accustomed to. So just for that reason, it can attract more players, new players to Dungeons and Dragons or even to classic RPGs to try out and enjoy the game. Not only that, but also on the topic of being a modern game, it's also a very pretty game. So you can immediately recognize it has a certain style, and it's pretty, it's shiny, okay? It looks good. It's visually, aesthetically pleasing. Now, this isn't something that I usually bring out as a positive when I'm talking about video games. I don't consider the graphics of a game to be an important aspect for the game to be a good game. I much prefer gameplay and story. But more recently, and maybe this is kind of on a personal note, so I've been talking about Baldur's Gate, both the originals and this one with my wife, Coredumpina, for some time. And I've been trying to get her to play Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 with me for years now. And I always get the same answer every time I try. It's like, no, that game looks very, very old. I can barely see my character. I don't understand anything that's going on. What is that combat log at the bottom? What's happening? So it's not an attractive game for her. And I imagine that this will be the same thing for a lot of new players. People that have never played the original Baldur's Gates, if somebody now looks at them, it's understandable that they find that the game looks old, that the UI feels antiquated, and they may not enjoy that, they may not want to try it. So I mentioned my wife as an example, but I also have a lot of friends that was exactly the same case. Some of them even tried it and gave up after they gave up in Candlekeep, which is disappointing, but whatever. However, when I showed her Baldur's Gate 3, just by looking at the style of the game, she immediately said, "This is the game I see myself playing with you." So, for that fact alone, it is something that this game has going for it in a big way, attracting new players. Even the character creation when you're starting a new game is going to be a massive selling point for a lot of people. So even if I don't really care that much about graphics, I do know that it will be a big factor to bring other people in. So, modern system, it's a pretty game, very good positives. Something else that I think that they do very well here is that in this game, at least from what I have seen in the early access, when you have a quest or some kind of obstacle that you find going through the game offers you a multitude of ways to solve that problem, to win that fight, to overcome that obstacle. And that's something that I think that all games should do in general, but even more importantly so RPGs, and I think that this game does it well. You can play out certain scenarios, assuming different alignments. You can take a good approach to quests and the overall, I don't know, whatever's happening in the game. You can be evil, you can be neutral, you can approach combat using stealth, by trying to persuade people. You can just kill them all. There's really a lot of ways to deal with the things you find throughout the world. Okay, so that's big in a very good way. And on that same topic, something that I think that they also do very well here is the interaction with the game world. You have a tremendous amount of interaction with the world of Baldur's Gate 3. You can interact with this lantern, you can interact with this plant, you can pick up stuff from the ground, you can move containers, you can jump over obstacles, you have verticality in the game, you can climb on top of rooftops, you can climb ladders. There's just so much that you can do in terms of interaction with the game world that makes it feel very, very rich in that aspect. So if I go back to what I talked about before of having different ways to approach problems, an example I can think of is you are trying to infiltrate a fortress, you can walk through the front door, or you can sneak around and find maybe a hole that you can crawl through, you can maybe break a weak wall, persuade the enemies to let you in. There's just so much to interact with the world that I really think that that's going to be a big selling point for this game. It's also something, by the way, that was inherited from Divinity Original Sin 2, and that's something that I think was well done. That's a big positive there. So these, I feel, are the best selling points for the game. I think the game has a lot of potential to do well, and from what I've played in the early access, the game is enjoyable, and I want to see more and play more of it. Okay, so very good so far. Moving on to what I consider to be the main differences between the original games and this one. And I mentioned that these are the primary because, like I said before, I think it's important for people to manage their expectations. When you call this game Baldur's Gate 3, people that played the originals are going to create certain expectations in what they expect to see and what they want to see in this game. And a lot of them are not going to be met. So, to start off, I'm going to mention, I believe, the biggest one, which is in terms of how the game plays out. So the topic here is going to be real-time with pause versus turn-based. So, the original games play in real-time with pause. That means that everything in the world happens at the same time. Okay, so if you engage in combat, all of your party members are going to be acting at the same time, and all of the enemies are also going to be acting at the same time. Real time, it's in the name. And the with pause part means that during combat or during any kind of interaction in the game, you can pause the game to have a strategic look at what's happening. So you can pause the game, and while the game is paused, you can issue commands. You can say, move my character over there, or cast a spell, or attack that guy. And when you unpause, those actions will be executed. Okay? It's a very fun approach to combat, in my opinion. And it's the way that the originals do it. In Baldur's Gate 3, this game, you only have turn-based. So in turn-based, the way that combat plays out is that every single action that you or your enemies take are going to be executed individually, one at a time. That's the explanation of these two systems. So, starting with turn-based, I'm going to mention what I feel is the biggest advantage for the turn-based system. And for that, I can actually exemplify by showing a fight from Baldur's Gate. Okay, so we jumped right into Baldur's Gate 2, and I'm going to exemplify what real-time with pause looks like. So as I've mentioned before, every action taken by every character you see is taken in real time, so it all happens at the same time. And you can also pause the game, as I have done just here, so that you can issue your strategic commands. So, for example, I can take my character here, Corgan, and tell him to attack this demon. I can tell this character over here to attack this one. I can say, Jahira, start casting a spell on that guy. Herdelis, cast a spell over there. Jan, you can do what? Improve haste on Corgan, and Edwin, I guess, can cast something like a Horde Golting, whatever. Doesn't matter. So, I have given instructions to every single one of my characters, and I'm going to unpause. So everything happening at the same time. We can even look at the combat log and see what's happening here. And as you can see, a lot of stuff is happening. So I will discuss this a little bit further when we go back to Baldur's Gate 3, but I think it's easy to understand that, especially for a new player, and even players that have played the game for a long while, it may be hard to keep track of what's happening during a fight. You may have somebody dying that you didn't even notice. You may have a character that you think is safe, but lost his protection for some reason and is gonna die. You may have spells being cast that you didn't even notice, while in turn-based that is not the case. Okay, so we are back now in Baldur's Gate 3 in the updated graphics, and we just saw a fight that anybody could easily consider to be chaotic. So, especially new players who are not accustomed with the game or with the systems or spells and whatnot, people probably won't understand 80% of what went on in that fight. Because again, everything is happening at the same time. You might be taking damage and you don't understand where that damage is coming from. You might be trying to hit an enemy and no damage is being dealt. Maybe because he had some protection cast a while back that you didn't even notice. Spells coming out from everywhere, you don't see what's happening, people dying. It can get very confusing and very overwhelming, especially for new players. When you are playing in turn-based, the biggest advantage is that you have complete control and complete understanding of every single action taking place during a combat. So, if your enemy is casting a spell, you will see him casting the spell and the target. If he moves, you will see where he's going. If he goes invisible, if he drinks a potion, if he attacks, everything will be shown one at a time. At the same time, when you are acting, you can control your actions and think them through carefully and with enough time. So we can trigger turn-based mode here. So in turn-based, the world stops, and if it's your action, you can decide that you want to move exactly 6.4 meters over there.
Where's the step?
And once you get there, you can consider your options like casting a spell or whatever you want to do. So you have more time to think things through and enjoy the strategic decisions that you take during a combat. This is especially relevant if you are fighting, and especially good if you are fighting a low number of enemies, and especially if those enemies are powerful enemies that may have a lot of passive abilities, or maybe they have access to magic and they cast a lot of spells, and you need to understand what's going on, how to approach the fight. With turn-based, you can do that and you can understand things a lot better. So that's the biggest upside, and it's also, I think, a better system for new players. The biggest downside, on the other hand, is when you are facing off against multiple opponents. And when I say multiple opponents, I don't mean 2 or 3. I'm saying something like 6, 8, 10, a large number of opponents. And an example of this is a pack of goblins. Goblins individually are not very strong. They're not meant to be strong. So they're usually in packs. And the problem with this is, when you are facing off against a large number of enemies, you are still playing in turn-based, so you will have to wait for every single action that every single enemy will take until it's your time to play again. So you will have to watch them move, you will have to watch them attack or cast a spell. Sometimes you even have to wait for the AI to calculate the next move. So it can very easily and very quickly become a boring encounter. So something that in the originals you would find, as an example, a pack of gibberlings or a pack of goblins, a pack of svarts, those, what you do is, they're not very threatening, so you pick up your fighters, you go in and you chop them up. And it's fun. It's a quick, fun, chaotic combat encounter. You see chunks of enemies flying all over the place, and you get it done in 10 to 15 seconds. So, just as a quick example, I thought to show this off. We have a bunch of enemies here. In this case, we're talking about gnoll captains. This doesn't really matter. But these are really not very threatening. I can just pick up my fighter here. Maybe even buff him up a little. No, let's not buff to just show the normal behavior. I can just say attack, and we can see how this plays out. So I think you can see the difference of what I'm talking about regarding fighting multiple enemies. We can just chop them up, and this fight took, what, like 3-5 seconds maybe? Much faster. That same encounter, playing out in turn-based mode, is going to take 5 to 15 minutes, depending on where the enemies are and if they are running away from you or not, and the spells you have available. So, especially for fights with numerous opponents, and even more so if those opponents are kind of simple and basic, it's just kind of boring. So, comparing it also with other games of this same style, we can look at Pillars of Eternity 2 or the Pathfinder games. In those games, you can choose to play either turn-based or real-time with pause. Pathfinder especially, you can switch between those modes at runtime. And I do feel like that's the best approach. So if anybody wants to play only in turn-based, they can do so. If they only want real-time with pause, they can do so as well. Or a player like me, I can go through 80% or 90% of the game in real-time with pause, because that's the way I prefer. But then when I find certain tougher enemies that I want some more control, I can switch to turn-based and play that way. But yeah, so in Baldur's Gate 3, you have turn-based, and these, I think, are its upsides as well as the limitations. And I am back. Sorry, I had to think about what I wanted to say here. So something else to note about real-time with pause versus turn-based is that one could also argue that turn-based is the more faithful recreation of Dungeons & Dragons, because Dungeons & Dragons is, after all, based on a tabletop game. And in tabletop, there's no real time, you just have, you know, turn-based combat. So it is more faithful in that aspect. And I can't really say that for a video game, one is inherently better than the other, but I will share my opinion. So for me, and again, very subjective, I prefer real-time with pause. I prefer it because I think that the game flows better. Combat flows better. I think that it's more engaging, it's more fun, it's more chaotic in a good way, and it just feels more explosive. And all of these things, I think, make for a funner encounter. And also, something else that I want to mention is that after playing the game a while, you start getting accustomed with the game mechanics, with the combat system, and you start to perceive what's going on during a fight a lot easier. And that means that after you start looking at the game this way, you no longer need the step-by-step, one instruction at a time of what's going on. It just starts to become kind of a needlessly long fight for something that you already know you're gonna win and could be done with in 20 seconds. So yeah, that's my take on real-time with pause versus turn-based. The other major difference that I find between the originals and Baldur's Gate 3, and not only the originals actually, but most classic RPGs like Pathfinder, Pillars of Eternity, Icewind Dale and whatnot, is the party size. This is something that has messed with my mind ever since I started playing the game. These games I just mentioned have a party size of 6 people, with the exception of Pillars of Eternity 2, which made me sad, but moving on. The original party size is a 6-man party. In Baldur's Gate 3, you only have 4. This is the same thing as Divinity Original Sin 2. Now, why is this such an issue for me? Because I find that 6 party members is the perfect number. The reason for that, in my opinion, is that every single time that I'm playing a game of this style, I always want in my party 4 core roles. So I need 4 people to fulfill those roles. And those roles are, I like to have a frontliner character. So by frontliner, I'm talking about someone that is capable of martial combat, like a melee combatant, that can dish out decent damage and can also withstand attacks from opponents. He should have some way to mitigate damage coming his way or avoid the damage entirely. Like, for example, having decent armor, using a shield, abilities to mitigate damage. And if we're talking about classes, this would be something like a fighter, a barbarian, a paladin, and to some extent a cleric. Okay? So someone to be in the front line, draw the attention of the enemies, and keep your backline safe. My second core role would be that of a divine caster, a support character, someone with access to divine spells and some form of healing. And for those, if we're talking about classes, I would think about a cleric or a druid. They have a very good repertoire of spells that will support your party in a way that other classes cannot. They can also heal your party, and they can also disable your enemies. I find that having a character capable of fulfilling this role is a crucial part to being successful in a party. The third core role is regarding thievery duties. This is something that's much more necessary in the originals than it is in Baldur's Gate 3, or generally speaking, than it is in the 5th edition. So if we're thinking about these games as a whole, you are going to have traps throughout the game. You are going to find locked chests, locked doors. You may want to pickpocket NPCs. You may want to scout ahead. see if there are enemies in the area, what kind of enemies, what's the layout of the terrain, all those things. And if you want that, you want a thief. In 5th edition you would have a rogue, but that's beside the point. So in BG1 and BG2, if you are playing without a thief, you are going to have a hard time in several sections, because you need a thief to disarm traps, to lockpick doors, to pickpocket opponents, and to scout. In the 5th edition, it's no longer mandatory to have a thief, because any class can fulfill those roles. Some more than others, especially if they have proficiency in those skills. So I'm talking about sleight of hand and stealth. So as an example, we have Shadowheart here. She's one of the potential or one of the possible NPC companions. She is a cleric, but by being a cleric of the trickery domain, she is proficient in thievery actions. This means that she is not that bad at fulfilling this role. At the same time, she will never be as good as a rogue for those tasks. So it's still a core role, but not necessarily tied to having a rogue. The fourth main role in any party, in my opinion, is somebody with access to arcane magic. So I'm talking specifically or especially about mages or sorcerers. The reason for this is that arcane magic in Dungeons and Dragons is not only incredibly fun, but it is also extremely useful. You have a lot of defensive spells, a lot of offensive spells. You have utility that can help you achieve a multitude of tasks. You can make people run faster. You can make them jump longer. You can light up the environment, as I'm doing right here. You can even fly by using arcane magic. Okay? There's just so much you can do with arcane magic that I feel that not having access to it in a party, you are going to be gimping yourself in a bad way. Now, I talked about 4 core roles, and the party size is for 4 people. So, no problem, right? But to me, there is a big problem. And the reason why I love having 6 characters in a party is because I can have more flexibility and more creative options. So I like having these 4 roles, and as an example, I like Will. I like Will a lot as a character. I find him interesting and I want to explore his storyline more. And also, a Warlock is a class that does not exist in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, so I want to explore it further. It's a lot of fun. However, in terms of arcane magic, he is kind of limited. The spell selection for a Warlock is not that great. It's not the same thing as a mage or a sorcerer. And also, the amount of spells he can cast during a combat is much, much more limited. So, right now, he can cast 2 spells per combat. That's an extremely low amount. If we can compare it with my sorcerer, for example, he can cast 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 spells compared to 2 spells. This means that when I want to fill my arcane caster role, I'm gonna have a very hard time in justifying to myself playing with Will rather than playing with a mage or a sorcerer. On that same topic, I kind of like having a bard in a party, but I would never pick a bard for this arcane caster role rather than a mage or a sorcerer. So this means that more often than not, I'm not going to be able to play with those classes if I want to have a solid party. I'm not saying that it is impossible to play the game without more people. That's not the case. You can perfectly well beat the game with 4 characters, but it just cuts on the creativity, it cuts on your flexibility and options when you are making your party. And for me, that's a bad thing. I like having my 4 core roles and then have the availability for flex spots, wildcard characters, and it is not the case here. So, in my opinion, that's a bad thing. I know that for other people, and I guess the upside for this is that it's more manageable. A lot of people that play classic RPGs, I'm not sure if it's a lot, but I've heard from several people that they don't like the fact that they have to control 6 companions. They don't, by the way, they don't have to have 6, but whatever. But by only having 4, they feel it's more manageable. Again, my personal opinion is I prefer 6 party members, but it is what it is. So, coming out of the topic of party members, this is something, of party size, something very related is companions. So, for companions in Baldur's Gate 3, keep in mind, I've only seen the early access, but I have a very strong indication that you will only have 5 NPC companions. This is easily visible by the loading screen images and whatever kind of content related to Baldur's Gate 3. You are always going to see those 5 companions, which is Shadowheart, Astarion, Will, the Githyanki lady, and Gale. So you are kind of limited in terms of your options for NPC companions. You only have 5 to choose from. So like I was saying, maybe down the line, later in the game, they would introduce other companions, but I highly doubt it. The reason why I doubt it is that Divinity Original Sin 2 plays the same way. You only have 5 possible companions, and they will go with you through the entire game. Okay? And from what I've seen, in the entire portion that's available in early access, there is no other possible companion. So, you have 5 possible companions here, and the upside to this is that by having fewer possible companions, they are better, they have more depth to them, or at least that's my hope and expectation. And since they have the origin stories, which is also something that they did in Divinity, their quest lines should be more fulfilling and rewarding to do. You can build a better relationship with these characters, and by being less, they had more time to work on them. So, you know, more depth is a good thing. However, if we look at Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, or, you know, Pillars of Eternity, Pathfinder and whatnot, you usually have a lot more availability. You have a lot more choice in terms of companions. And to me, that's a much better approach, because you have a lot more variety of who you want to play with. You can create very different parties with many different companions. Different combinations of classes, synergies between classes. You may want different alignments, different personalities. You have a lot to choose from that can give you many different playthroughs with different experiences coming out of the companions. Not the case here. So, it does feel much more limiting. And another thing that has to be mentioned is that, going back to the example of the core roles, let's say that you want to have, like myself, a divine caster in your party to fit the role of a support caster. You have Shadowheart. That's it. You have no other option. So, in Baldur's Gate 2, if I wanted a support caster, I could immediately think of Anomen, Eri, Viconia, Cerned, Jahira. Okay, so off the top of my head, I have 5 possible companions that can fit this role. I can even have multiple of them in my party. In here, I only have Shadowheart. That is very restrictive. So, if I don't like, for example, her class, and I wanted a druid to fit this role, I would have to have a main character druid. Because from what I've seen so far, the game doesn't allow you to create custom companions, which is actually something that I really hope that they implement. Really. Because again, let's say that I want a cleric, but I don't want a cleric of the trickery domain. Again, you have no options. Let's say I want a cleric, but I want it to be a goody-goody cleric. Lawful good aligned cleric. Shadowheart doesn't really fit that role. Let's say if you just don't like Shadowheart, you don't like her face, you don't like her voice. This may sound like nitpicking, but you are gonna be hearing her voice for the entire game. So if you don't like her, there's no other choice. You can't change it. So it feels very restrictive. And even if they do implement custom companions, that means you will have another companion fitting her role, but he will have no voice lines, he will have no quest, no personality, so it feels more empty in that way. So yeah, in terms of the companions, I do think that it's kind of a problem. It's a big difference between the originals and this one, and in my opinion, it is a little bit disappointing that these are our only options. Also, something that I wanted to add regarding companions, and I feel it's noteworthy to make this comparison with Divinity Original Sin 2, is that in Divinity you also only have those 5 companions, but I think it works much better there than it does in Baldur's Gate 3. Because in Divinity, you can build your characters in whichever way you want. They can be a melee fighter, they can be an archer, they can be a mage, they can be a combination of anything. So there is no... the notion of a Dungeons and Dragons class does not apply to Divinity. So in Divinity, even though you only have 5 NPC companions, since you can make them become whatever you need and customize them in any way you need, you don't really need that many more to fulfill or to have a more creative party or a more versatile party. Next topic, also related to party size, which is the way that you control your party members. So this is basically only relevant if we're talking about just moving through the game world, not so much in combat, because in combat it's turn-based and you only act with one at a time. But in the originals, and I can show an example right here of how movement works. So let's look at the way that you can control your party in Baldur's Gate 2. And this is, like I said, the same way you can control it in many of these games like Pillars, Icewind Dale, Pathfinder and whatnot. And the way you do it is you can select any number of characters that you want, and then you basically issue instructions or commands and say move over here, and they will follow a set formation and move all at the same time to wherever you want. Not only that, but you can just pick one of these characters, you know, and move around with just this one, or you can pick 2 of them and move with 2 of them. You can even shift select a 3rd one, whatever you want to do, and just move them around with your main character or whoever you want. So I do think that this is a very simple and easy way to control your characters. And we're back. So back again to Baldur's Gate 3. So we just saw how you can control your party in Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2. You can basically move your characters in whatever way that you want and with a certain degree of control. But in Baldur's Gate 3, the only option you have is you have an active character, and you can only give actions to him. And when you do so, the rest of your party follows you around. This is the way you can move your party. You can also unchain your character from the rest of the group, and then you can move him solo. You can chain him with another character and make like separate groups, so a group of 2 and a group of 2. But that's kind of the way you have to play around with party movement. Having people follow you around, in my opinion,
Perhaps, but
is not the best approach. And so it's a very different way of controlling the party from the originals. And I've been trying to find positives and negatives about every single thing. But for this change, I can't find a positive. I tried, I don't find a single positive side of having party movement and party control be done this way. This is again something that was inherited from Divinity Original Sin 2, and I didn't like it there, I don't like it here. And yeah, I think it's just a bad system. At times, you want to move somewhere and your characters, they kind of drag, they don't follow you around at the same speed of the others. They may get stuck behind. I've had instances where I'm trying to move my party, and when I reach the other place, I noticed that one guy was left behind for some reason. And they are using their own pathfinding AI, so they may move through places you don't want them to move through. It just feels like you are losing control over your party for no benefit. I really see no advantages of having party movement be done like this. So yeah, not really sure what else to say about it, but I do feel like it's a relevant difference that's worth mentioning here. My next topic is going to be the camera, and I'm going to exemplify this in a different area. So the camera, the way you move your camera is much different than what you have naturally in the original games, because Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, you have this isometric 2D view over the game world, while in Baldur's Gate 3 you have a full 3D scenario, right? So in Baldur's Gate, the originals, you have no concept of verticality, and in this one you have a lot of it. Like I said before, you can climb onto roofs, you can climb ladders, you can jump over cliffs or over obstacles. You have a lot of different options in terms of interacting with the game world and verticality. What this also means is that the camera is going to behave differently. You're not only going to have a single point of view. However, this also comes with some downsides. And in my opinion, the camera is very, very janky. This is, again, something inherited from Divinity Original Sin 2, from the same game engine. I thought the camera was janky there, it's still janky here. So sometimes you're trying to figure something out in combat and you move the camera and it kind of clips into the building, or it may get stuck on a wall, stuck on a tree. There's just so many weird interactions that I've faced so far while playing the game with the camera that there's too many to count. I understand why the camera has to be this way, because like I said, different worlds, 3 dimensions and whatnot, but it can be weird and complicated to use the camera, and it is to a point where sometimes you get frustrated and upset with those controls. So that is something that I consider to be, you know, something that they could improve on. So also a big difference, right? The way you see the world. We're on top of a roof right now, while in the originals you only have a single viewpoint. The other thing that I really, really don't like about the camera is that if you want to explore, just view the world with the camera, you are limited. So right now I'm pressing W to try and move forward with the camera to check out that area, and I can't do it. The camera will only go a certain radius around your party members. If you want to go further than that, you have to move your party closer to your target to be able to see that region. And this is very, Very annoying. It's very frustrating. In the originals, you can see wherever you want it. And I can even provide an example for that right now. So let's exemplify and compare how the camera and the movement of your party over larger distances works. So in this case, I can zoom out a great deal actually. And with the camera, I can check out the entire map. Okay, so this is the map for this region, and you can examine any portion of the map. Naturally, as long as you have already explored it and no fog of war is present. Now, the big difference is that over here, I can just say, move the camera over here to this corner, and tell my characters, come over here. And they will start moving and reach its destination. I can also exemplify the problem with the map. So, in Baldur's Gate 3, when you open a map, well, we've just seen that in Baldur's Gate 3, the camera doesn't really pan very far from your characters, and over here it goes any way that you want. But another big problem is that when you open the map, you cannot say, show me this region. You cannot do this and then just say something like, move over here, which is a lot simpler to control than in Baldur's Gate 3. Also,
Yes. Oh, all right.
hello Edwin, I love you.
What is it now?
So yeah, we just saw the example of Baldur's Gate 2, the way you can move around the camera and move around with the map, and here you cannot do that. So the other disadvantage of this is that if I want to open my map and I want to see what's in this area, I cannot do it, right? So in Baldur's Gate 2, my previous example, I could open the map, click on a place, and the camera would go there. Here, I can't. So if I want to tell my party, move to this position, I cannot do it. I have to manually, literally go holding the hand of my party and move them through the road, guiding them through over here until we get to this point. That's unnecessarily annoying. I think you should be able to click in a position in the map and the camera should jump over there, and you should be able to tell your party, go over here in the map. Because the way it stands right now, there are certain situations where it gets very tiring and kind of frustrating when you want to move to a different place and you have to go about it, you know, step by step. Don't like it, wish it was better. But yeah, that's one of my issues with the camera. And this will lead me to my final point of differences and things that I think could be improved on this game. And I'm talking about waypoints. So right here we can see we can see an example of why the camera is annoying me. I was trying to zoom in to show the waypoint, but since we're up here, I can't do it. But yeah, this purple thing here, this rune, is a waypoint. And waypoints are used to traverse the map in an instantaneous manner. So if you've played other games of this style, like or any other game with waypoints, for example Witcher 3, Skyrim and many others, these are basically fast travel points. So if I have discovered the waypoint for the goblin camp, for example, I can just teleport over there without having to walk all the way through the map. And I think that they use these waypoints also to kind of work around the camera limitation. Not sure if that's the case, but I guess it kind of does work as a workaround. So the upside of the waypoints, naturally, is that this is a quality of life improvement. If I want to go from the goblin camp all the way over here, I don't have to walk the entire way, right? I can just go there. The issue though with these waypoints is, I'm gonna give a practical example here, but I'm gonna explain the issue first. So the issue is that typically when you're playing a game with fast travel points, I'm kind of accustomed to, if you want to go to a specific waypoint, you have to reach another waypoint and then you can teleport to the other one you want. In Baldur's Gate 3, like Divinity, that doesn't happen. You can teleport to a waypoint from wherever you are. You don't actually need to be close to a waypoint to teleport to another one. Some of you may see this as, again, a quality of life improvement, and in a certain extent it is. I recognize the advantage, but I'm gonna show you why I don't think this makes sense for the game. And as a real example, we are right here. This is a goblin camp. I'm not gonna spoil it for you, I'm not gonna say what happens here, but just acknowledge that this is a goblin camp, and usually this is filled with goblin NPCs. These NPCs are neutral, and as I mentioned before, something that the game does very well is it allows you to approach different objectives in many different ways. So let's say that my objective was to infiltrate this fortress. The ways I could go about it would be I could come into the goblin camp and kill everything and gain access, or I could sneak past them, or I could persuade them, for example. And in this last example, where I persuade them that I'm their friend, for instance, these goblins would remain neutral. So I could bypass all of these goblins and enter this fortress. Let's continue our example, and let's say that coming in here, we found some goblins, but we kinda got on their bad side. This could have happened because maybe I spoke to this guy and I told him something that I shouldn't, or I tried pickpocketing him and he noticed me, or I did something like loot a treasure, they spotted me and they activated an alarm system. Whatever the reason may be, if these guys turn hostile and raise an alarm, all goblins in the area are going to be hostile as well. So I could go into the fortress, do whatever I had to do, and then when I'm done with this, I still have to go out, right? I have to leave. So when I'm leaving, I would still have to deal with a bunch of angry goblins in this area. And again, what would make sense to me would be I would have to kill them all, or I would have to sneak past them, or I would have to persuade them of something. But since we have waypoints, what I can just do is, I don't want to bother with this goblin camp, I simply teleport away. And to me, this doesn't make sense. I believe you should have to deal with those kinds of encounters, not just be able to bypass everything by using a waypoint. I have seen one instance in the early access where the game does not allow you to use waypoints because it considers the area you're on as a danger area, or a... don't remember the actual name, but yeah, it's basically a danger area, and I think that makes sense, and that should be present in more places. So there is a lot of quality of life regarding waypoints for faster movement, easier movement, but I do think that it kind of breaks the logic of the game in certain situations. So again, that's one of my issues with the game, and also a difference from the originals that don't have waypoints. Something else that I wanted to mention, and this I guess we can consider to be more of a nitpick, but it is something that gets on my nerves after a while, and it is the amount of containers that this game has. Again, another problem inherited from Divinity. So, I just got into this area, and I'm actually missing a party member. Again, this perfect example of what I was talking about before, of party control. Sometimes you get these weird interactions where this guy should have followed my party, but instead he got stuck outside. It sucks. But yeah, so just on this small little area here, I'm just gonna light this up a bit so you can see it better. You have 2 barrels, 2 trunks, 1 sack, one cupboard, 2 bottle racks, plus 3 crates, plus 4 sacks, plus another cupboard, 2 more sacks, a crate, 2 more crates. So, I mean, why? Why so much of this stuff? I would understand if they actually had some kind of relevant content, but a lot of the times when you're opening up these containers, they are either empty or they can have irrelevant content like moldy bread or tongs, or you can have something like a rag. I mean, it feels kind of pointless, and again, I do realize this might sound like a nitpick here, but after a while it gets kind of tiring to have to go over every single container in the game, because you're always thinking, I might miss something if I'm not actively, you know, searching every container. And that can be a little bit annoying at times. The positive here is that... Open the door, please. Thank you. Is that since you can interact with items in the game world, like you can drag and throw items and even make staircases with them to reach higher places, it can be beneficial to have more of this kind of interaction, because it allows this flexibility, okay, this creativity. So it's not all bad having a lot of containers, although I do feel like it's a little bit too much. But yeah, so again, it's already a long video. I feel like I could discuss a great deal more topics, but I feel like these things are the most important ones. Coredumpina?
Yes, because now it's time for my review.
Are you gonna give a review?
Well, I backseated gaming Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 a lot, so I haven't played, but I pretty much don't know the game by heart now. And the first thing I thought when I looked at it is, oh, is this Divinity? So, yes,
Yeah,
some people can... I mean, it does look a bit, but I did like Divinity 2, and I heard this is going to be multiplayer, so...
Yeah, that's also one of my hopes.
Yeah, so...
So, by the way, just
that happens?
to also add to what she said, she also felt like this was more similar to Divinity, because she also played Divinity Original Sin 2 with me, at least a little bit. We didn't actually finish the game, and there's a lot that looks like Divinity. Even these fish barrels look like Divinity. And for Coredumpina, it's actually a great improvement in terms of the look of the game. It's a lot prettier, it's much shinier. While if I show her Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, yeah, she doesn't like it. I've tried to
I like the story though.
She likes the story.
The story is very good.
But I've tried to make her play Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 multiple times, and I just can't do it. But I feel like this one...
Yeah, probably. And I think it's actually a good way to make more people, and maybe younger people, interested in Baldur's Gate. So maybe it could be actually an entrance point for other people to look at classic RPGs. And so I agree with you in the beginning with that this could make actually companies look at this type of games in a different light. So I do think that there are a ton of good things going for it. So
yeah, I think so too.
I'm actually excited to play.
And I actually think that Wizards of the Coast had maybe a big impact in how this game was actually designed, because I also feel like they want to share and make people aware of and try out Dungeons and Dragons, the 5th edition, and by making this game, and again, this is why I feel like they're using the Baldur's Gate name more for this kind of marketing purpose. They want more people to try out Dungeons and Dragons and the 5th edition. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, let's hope it does happen, I mean.
So more people being interested in the style of game is always a plus. More interest means more games, more content for everybody that enjoys them. So I think it is a big positive.
Yeah, and like if you want like a girlfriend or a wife or somebody that's more into newer games to play something like this with you, I mean, just start them with this. Don't start them with Baldur's Gate 1 or 2. Yeah.
Yeah, this game does feel a lot cuter
Yeah.
and much easier to show someone and have that someone be interested in it, because just by showing like the character, in fact, just by showing the character creation, a lot of people are gonna be like, "Ooh, pretty shiny, I like it," and they're gonna want to play it. While in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, you don't really have
So
that.
there's like a kobold now.
Maybe.
Yeah, but
Okay.
that was what I wanted to say. I mean, you do sound a bit critic sometimes, but overall, I think we are excited for the game and we really, really want to play it, right?
Yeah. Okay, so I think that these are the main features, the main differences between Baldur's Gate 3 and the original games. I think that these are the things that anybody coming from the old games to this one, that may strike them as the biggest changes and may frustrate some of their expectations when, you know, coming to this game. Because, and this I think is also something that deserves to be discussed, I think that probably one of the best decisions that Larian made is simultaneously one of the ones that makes the least sense. And it is the fact that they call this game Baldur's Gate 3. And I will say this again because I know a lot of people are going to get defensive about it. I'm not trashing on the game. I'm just mentioning and sharing what I think about this. But I think it was a good choice to call it Baldur's Gate 3 for their end, for marketing purposes, because the game generates a lot of hype, a lot of people that... Basically anybody that knows classic RPGs knows Baldur's Gate. It is a name that carries weight, and I do believe that the game has a lot more attention and a lot more players buying the game and trying the game than if it were called something different. So in that aspect, I think it was a great decision on their end to call it Baldur's Gate 3, but at the same time, it's kind of a confusing decision, right? So for people that have played the originals, like myself, I look at this game and I don't understand why it's called Baldur's Gate 3. I don't see a reason for this game to be called Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 1, Baldur's Gate 2 and Throne of Ball shared a story. There was a storyline. It was the Ball-Spawn saga. It starts in Candlekeep with Garayan, and it ends in the Throne of Ball fighting Melisandre. The story had a beginning, a meaning, a beginning, a meaning. It had a beginning, a middle, and a conclusion. That story is finished. So why are we calling this game Baldur's Gate 3? Especially when the game takes place 100 years in the future, the story doesn't seem to be related at all. I mean, maybe at some point in the game there's gonna be like a plot twist and oh my god, you're related to Ball in some... I don't know, man. But from what I've seen, that doesn't seem to be the case. This seems to be a game that has its own story, and there's no problem with that. I like that the games have their own stories. They don't need to be a sequel. But if that's the case, again I ask, why is this game called Baldur's Gate 3? Because the only reason that I see for somebody to call this Baldur's Gate 3 is that it's for marketing purposes and because it's a Dungeons and Dragons game? Is that the reason? Because other than that, I don't see why it's called Baldur's Gate 3. It doesn't continue the story. It's massively different in terms of gameplay, look and feel. Basically, everything about the game is very different from the originals. And again, I'm not saying this is bad, but what I'm saying is when people play the originals and a game comes out called Baldur's Gate 3, certain expectations are gonna be in people's heads. And you can't really fault them for that, right? They expect something. So if not, they're gonna be asking the same question I'm asking now. Why is the game called Baldur's Gate 3? Why? I I think that this game would make a lot more sense, and a lot of people, maybe myself included, because I can't really be unbiased here, a lot of people will judge the game differently. Because if somebody had told me, look, here's this game, it's a game coming out from Larian Studios after they did Divinity Original Sin 2, it's a game that looks like Divinity, it kind of plays like Divinity, and it's a classic RPG, I would be like, awesome! I want that game! I loved Divinity Original Sin 2. Give me more! Right? And I would play the game and I would say, cool, this is a really cool game, it's using Dungeons and Dragons, which I love, so what's not to like? But as it stands, by calling it Baldur's Gate 3, there's a lot of things that are going to keep gnawing at the back of my mind, like, why did they do this like this? Why is this changed? And I'm gonna give an example here. I won't spoil it for you because it's been spoiled for me and I didn't like it. But I've heard that Larian, and I think this is public knowledge, so it's not a big spoiler anyway, but I'm not gonna spoil it, that certain companions from the original games are gonna make an appearance here. Okay? And I know why they're doing it. It's always fun to see certain characters come back and whatnot. But again, that's going to raise certain expectations. And my god, man, if they bring back the companions, but they butcher their voices, I'm gonna kill someone. I'm gonna kill someone. I'm gonna be very upset. So yeah, again, I ask, why not make this game exactly as it is and call it Larian Dungeons and Dragons Adventure 1? Why not? It would make a lot more sense. People would not have the expectations they have now. People wouldn't get upset. People wouldn't get frustrated. I think it would just avoid a lot of grief overall. But yeah, that's my rant on that topic. I know a lot of you may curse me and call me names for it, but, well, you wanted my opinion, I'm just sharing my opinion. With that being said, let's conclude this video. Like I said, I mentioned what I believe are the main differences between the games. I also mentioned what I feel that this game has the potential for, and I really, really see it as a game with a lot of potential. So if there was something that I did not cover, maybe some other topic that you may want to discuss, or you may want to know my opinion, or a difference between this game and the originals, whatever you may want to ask, leave a comment below, because again, I'm not going to be covering every single thing here. I don't even remember many of those things, and it would be a 9-hour video. So just leave a comment and I will happily discuss the topic with you. And I will also once again state that I really, really hope that this game is a big success. I want people to play it and enjoy it and have fun with it, myself included, obviously, so that we have another great game to add to the list of awesome RPGs, and I can talk about it with you guys because I love discussing these games, and just be an overall success. And once more, I want to say that even though I mentioned a lot of stuff that can annoy me or frustrate me in Baldur's Gate 3, stuff that I would like to see different, that I would like to see improved, this doesn't mean that I don't like the game. I like the game. And a lot of the things I mentioned as could use an improvement are things that were inherited from Divinity Original Sin 2. A lot of these things are because of the game engine. And I will say again, like I said in the video, I love Divinity Original Sin 2. It is an awesome, awesome game. It is a game that I've been meaning to upload a playthrough. Well, first I have to make it, but to make and upload a playthrough of, and put in my channel because I love that game so much. I've played it many times, I want to play it more, and I want to share the experience with you guys. So, Divinity also shares the problems I mentioned here. It doesn't mean it's a bad game. On the contrary, it's an excellent game. So yeah, I think I can close the video on this. Overall, I think we can expect Baldur's Gate 3 to be a very, very different game from Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2. I also think that that's something that was kind of inevitable in some way, because I mean it's been over 20 years. People have different preferences or different enjoyments for games nowadays. You know, there are different game engines. This isn't an Infinity Engine game. So yeah, there are differences. It is to be expected. So something that's also expected makes me sad. This is just a side note, sorry. Companions in this game all want to have sex with you after 30 minutes. Like, you complete 1 or 2 quests and everybody wants to jump into bed with you. It feels very superficial. Not only that, they will want to go to bed with you regardless of what you are. You can be a male, you can be a female, you can be a human, a dwarf, a gnome. It doesn't matter. They all want to have sex with you. I realize that we are in a time and age where everybody wants to be politically correct and nobody wants to offend anyone. Sure, I understand it. But goddamn, that just means that the characters, it's like they don't have a personality. They don't have any preference. They want to appease to everybody. It makes them just feel shallow. So, as a comparison, you also had romance in Baldur's Gate 2, I believe, only. And I'm gonna take the example of Viconia, which is the one that I know best. Viconia, you can romance, but she only likes humans and elves, if I'm not mistaken. She will not romance dwarves or gnomes, and she will only romance males. Maybe if that happened in this game, Twitter or X would now be filled with rants of people saying that, oh my god, this character is a racist and a sexist and whatnot, and this game needs to be cancelled. Jesus, man, just go home, just shut up. Characters need to have personalities to be enjoyable and fun. And not only that, in Baldur's Gate 2, when you romance a character, the romance will basically last from the moment you recruit the character into your party almost all the way to the end of the game. In here, it's like 1 or 2 quests. It just, I don't know, it feels shallow. So again, this is a sign of the times, right? So I kind of expect this to happen, but I still find it silly. Whatever, I kind of messed up my conclusion. I'm gonna go back to what I was saying. I hope Baldur's Gate 3 is a success. I hope people enjoy the game. I hope that I can play this game with my wife and she also enjoys the hell out of it. I want to make multiple playthroughs. I want to share a lot of videos with you guys, guides, showing fun features, solutions to puzzles, certain combat encounters against maybe bosses and whatnot. And if mods come out that also improve the challenge of the game, even more stuff to share. And maybe other companies will look at this game as a success and want to make more RPGs. That's really a win-win for everybody. So let's hope the game does well. In 3 to 4 days, we're gonna have the final release. Expect my full playthrough to start being uploaded on that day. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you guys will stick with me to also watch the journey. What else did I want to mention? Let me think. Yeah, well, I guess I want to state that I also have a lot of content of Baldur's Gate already in the channel. I have a playthrough for Baldur's Gate 1, Siege of Dragonspear, Baldur's Gate 2, and Throne of Ball, all in the channel. I have other Infinity Engine games as well, like Icewind Dale 1 and 2. I have Pillars. I'm aiming to also have Pathfinder and Divinity uploaded at some point. So if you guys have any questions, any suggestions, anything at all, leave a comment below. If you enjoy this kind of content, consider subscribing for more. Like I said, I intend on having a lot more Baldur's Gate 3 coming into the channel very, very soon. And I hope to see you all in a future video. Until then, stay safe everyone.